Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to CSM Woodworking. Today we're going to be going over making a bench. We had a customer want one for his table. You could also use these as entryway benches. Here we're just getting some general 2x4s cut down. I like to take the rounded edges off of it so when we put it through the router table later on, it makes it a little easier to work with. Here we are setting up the router table. I'm going to be using a round over bit just to kind of follow the profile of the legs that we're using, get everything to tie in together. When you are setting up the router table, I use this small metal ruler just to make sure it's just touching the bearing and have the fence so we get an even cut on both sides. Sometimes it takes a little longer to set up, but that's okay. You want to end up with the right profile after. Here as well, I'm going to send all the pieces through the router table and then adjust it. I probably have to do this 3 or 4 times just to raise it up. You don't want to take too much off. You'll risk tear out of the back end as well as just kind of sometimes messing up your piece in general and having to start over. So I've learned maybe 3 or 4 or 5 passes maybe better off for your final cut than trying to take too much off at one time. This is just a little step I like to do after we finish routing. I kind of put these in a vise, go ahead and sand up all the little edges just to get some nibs and things like that off. We're going to use the pocket hole jig because it seems like we put everything together with pocket holes. These will be on the inside of the rails that we're putting on, kind of just be the apron of the bench. Right now, I'm marking the either side of it just to make sure they're both in the center, so you have even space on both sides. This all depends on the thickness of your material. I'm leaving 2x4s just because I like it a little more sturdy. As he's got kids, it's going to be jumping on the bench and moving around. And over the years, I just don't want them coming apart on them. We're actually using 2.5-inch exterior screws as well. We'll end up plugging those with pocket hole plugs and sanding it down. Legs we ordered off Carolina Leg Company. I've ordered quite a bit of legs for various dinner table and bench projects. They have all sorts of stuff. Usually come in very good quality and just makes it a lot faster and gives you a good style so you don't have to actually make these legs on a lathe yourself. And if you're interested in these legs or any other ones, we'll put the link in the description so you can go ahead and purchase some legs for yourself. The corner supports I put in, they're actually glued and brad nailed just to prevent racking. Right here, I'm marking the center so we can go ahead and put 2.5-inch screws into it, just give a little extra support. I'm marking the center so that way we can make sure the screw goes directly into the center and not off to the side. You want to avoid putting the screw too high in the support as well because when it does come in contact with the leg, you don't want the corner to split. This is how the finished base should look. We've got all 4 supports in there, all the legs on with the apron installed. Now we're going to move over to unclamping the top that we glued up. This is a poplar top. And we're going to end up putting a round over bit on that as well. I've actually become really fond of these benchtop cookies. Holds it down so you don't have to clamp it and you can router without having to move clamps around. If you're going to be doing anything such as hand planing, probably have to clamp it down. This track saw is great for squaring up the edges. Just make sure I do use this big square so that way you're actually getting a square cut. And that way you can make sure your project at the end is actually square. I usually like to start out with a 100 grit to start the sanding process. I have learned that the easier you press on the sander, the better your final project's going to come out and end up with swirls in it. And then we end up stepping up to 220 and repeating the same process. This is the round over bit we're using with just a little trim router, trying to get the edges rounded over. Again, more passes is better with this, so that way you can end up with a better project instead of tearing out your whole piece and either having to cut it down to hide the mistake or just start over. I like to sand the edges here by hand just to get little burn marks out and fix any little mistakes or cracks that you may have caused while routing. Here's the final bench put together. I used figure 8 tabletop fasteners to fasten the top to the base. For the top, we went ahead and took it off. I always like to pre-stain my projects, even though some hardwoods you're not supposed to pre-stain. I found out for me it just works out better. It looks a little more uniform. The stain color we use is espresso. I've really become fond of the Minwax line. I feel like they're just a quality stain. Now, when you're applying the stain, I try to do it on big projects in half, wipe the stain off, and then stain the other half. Just trying to apply even coats and not letting it dry or soak in too much so you can continue to get a uniform color. What I have noticed for myself though is when I do apply the stain, kind of wipe the excess off and get another rag and just make sure it's 100% dry, because if you don't or leave spots, sometimes I've noticed variances where if I've left too much stain on, you can definitely see when it dries. So I like to make sure my project is nice and dry after I apply the stain. Here's the finished bench ready to be delivered. It took a few coats of paint and primer to get it looking like this, but all in all, I'm very happy with the way it came out and the customer liked it as well. Thanks for watching, and come back and see what we're going to be working on next time. Have a few more projects in the works. We're excited to share with you. Make sure to like and follow so you can see what we're working on next time.